The new overseer came to arrest me at dawn. And, honestly, I was more annoyed than afraid. The wind started howling around the lighthouse about 20 minutes before he knocked, which felt melodramatic even for this coast. It squeezed through the cracks in the crooked window frames, whistling over my maps, and tugging at the edges of old charts until they fluttered like nervous wings. Easy, I muttered to the room, as if the building itself could hear me. If someone's going to fall apart first thing in the morning, it's going to be me. The lighthouse answered with a long, creaking groan, offended. I sat cross-legged on the floor beside the low table I'd made out of 2 crates and a board, turning my old brass compass over in my hands. The casing was dented, a hairline crack running through the glass like a faded scar. The needle still wobbled weakly when I tilted it, trying to decide what counted as north these days. Same, I told it, and took another sip of lukewarm coffee. Inside my lighthouse, chaos had a very specific order. Charts were stacked everywhere, some tacked to the peeling walls, some lying in uneven piles. Smudged ink notes, coastlines etched in fading lines, routes that no official map ever showed. Rusted navigational tools scattered among them, dividers, rulers, a sextant that probably should have been thrown out with the last storm. A nest of gray wool blankets had colonized an old armchair by the window. Someone more respectable might have called the place unlivable. For me, it was perfect. No commander. No alpha giving orders. No routine checks or scent patrols. Just salt, wind, and the quiet ticking of a compass that didn't really work. I could feel the ocean even with my eyes closed. The low, constant thud of waves hitting rock, the faint tang of salt on my tongue. It's the only thing that ever really made sense after I broke. Or, got broken. Depends on who you asked. The stairs shuddered under a new weight. Not the wind this time. Footsteps. Heavy, measured, climbing. I sighed and set the compass down very carefully beside my coffee cup. Of course, I said to no one. He comes on time. Authority types always do. The knock came 3 heartbeats later. 3 hard raps, precise, the sound cutting straight through wood and bone. Whoever was on the other side of that door stood too still, too controlled. I could feel it like a pressure drop before a storm. I considered pretending I wasn't home. Then I looked around at the maps, the forbidden equipment, and the fact that my whole existence screamed questionable. If they'd come this far, they weren't going to just give up and leave a polite note. Fine, I muttered, pushing to my feet. Let's meet the new wolf in charge. The door stuck, as usual. I yanked it open with a sharp jerk of my shoulder, and almost collided with black. Not just black, regulation black. The man on my threshold filled the doorway so completely the dawn light had to squeeze around him in thin strips. He wore the overseer's coat. Long, heavy, lined with dark leather that caught the faint gray morning. His shoulders looked like they'd never heard of slouching. Golden eyes regarded me from under dark, neatly cut hair, cool and assessing. He smelled like storm front. Not metaphorically. Not poetically. Like that charged electric heaviness that rolls over the sea before the sky splits open. Old instinct in me twitched, aware, the way the ocean feels a storm an hour before it hits. But that was all. No instinctive drop of my gaze. No urge to bow my neck. No melting in my knees, no soft dizzy tug of omega submission. Just awareness. And annoyance that I was barefoot and wearing an oversized moth-chewed sweater with a hole at the collar. Kael? He asked, voice deep, smooth and controlled. Every syllable sharpened. Resident of the North Beacon, unregistered? His gaze skimmed over me once, quick and clinical. I watched for the usual flicker. The moment when an alpha's pupils dilate, when their nostrils flare as they pick up the scent of omega. It didn't come. His expression didn't change at all. That was almost flattering. That depends, I said. Who's asking? Door-to-door preacher? Lost tourist? New tax inspector? The corner of his mouth didn't even twitch. Rocator, he said. Appointed overseer of Haven Rock by the Northern Council. His gloved hand shifted slightly. Paper rustled. I'm here to execute a seizure order. Romantic, I said. You bring everyone paperwork on your first date? He held up the folded document between 2 fingers. The order cites contraband navigational equipment, unreported trade activity, and harboring unauthorized routes, he recited. Under council law, that's grounds for search and detainment. I leaned casually against the doorframe, ignoring the way the wood dug into my shoulder. You practiced that in the mirror on the way here? His jaw clenched for half a second. I almost smiled. Then he stepped forward, and the air changed. It's hard to explain alpha pressure to anyone who's never felt it. For most omegas, it's like gravity suddenly tripling. It sinks into muscle and bone, telling your body in no uncertain terms who's higher in the food chain. Knees buckle. Breath shortens. The instinct to lower your head, bare your neck, say yes to anything just to make it stop. It's baked into the species. At least, it used to be baked into me. Ro's presence rolled over the threshold like a wave, heavy, commanding. The hairs on my arms lifted. My heart kicked once, more from memory than instinct. And then, nothing. No pull, no compulsion. Just a weight that met something inside me like a wall and slid off. Ro's eyes narrowed a fraction. Omega Kael, he said. Step aside. There it was. The word that used to define my entire life. Omega. I watched his pupils. Still no flare. Still no flicker of recognition. You'll want to be more specific, I said lightly. I collect labels. You'll have to shout a little louder if you want that one to stick. His brows drew together slightly. He took another step forward, the pressure ticking up a notch, pushing against me. Against something that wasn't there anymore. No use, overseer. Whatever switch the world expected to flip in me had been smashed a long time ago. You're obstructing official council business, he said. The thread of irritation finally bled through, subtle but satisfying. Step aside and comply with the search order. See, that's the problem, I said. You're talking like you expect a certain reaction, and I hate disappointing people, but... His shoulders rolled back, breath leaving him in a controlled exhale. He was adjusting his stance, doubling down. Of course he was. And Omega should, he began. Wow, I cut in brightly. You even know how the sentence goes. You read the manual and everything. I'm impressed. For a split second, the wind was the only sound between us. Then something hot and sharp flashed in his eyes. You think council law is a joke? He asked quietly. I think anyone who comes into my home at dawn with a stack of paper, and a superiority complex, I said, should at least bring breakfast. He moved fast. One moment he was on the threshold, the next he'd stepped inside, gloved hands snapping out toward my wrist. The coat swirled around his legs, boots thudding against the warped floorboards. Up close, the storm scent was stronger, threaded with steel and cold air. Reflex made me twist away before his fingers could close. I'd spent years on deck with waves trying to throw me overboard. Years learning how to duck a swinging hook and slide between angry bodies in tight spaces. Compared to that, one well-trained alpha in a coat was manageable. Ro's hand caught only air. His body checked, recalibrated, turning with me. His gaze flicked around the room, taking in the evidence, maps, instruments, the old sextant glinting sullenly on the table. His jaw tightened. This equipment is illegal without a council permit, he said. You'll be detained until your case is reviewed. Hard pass, I said. You can leave the paperwork though, I'll frame it. He reached for me again. This time, when his fingers closed around my forearm, I let him. Not because his rank demanded it. Because I wanted to see. Pressure rolled off him, pouring into the contact. If I'd still been what the world thought I was, my body would have melted. Muscles loosening, breath coming shallow, spine bending. Instinct would have screamed, submit, submit, submit. Instead, his grip registered as firm, hot through the thin knit of my sweater. And wrong. It was like listening to a song you knew by heart and realizing all the notes were missing. For a heartbeat, confusion flickered across his face. Just a crack, but I saw it. What are you doing? He asked, low, letting you try your best. I smiled, all teeth. Is it working? You tell me. He squeezed harder, testing. His aura surged around us, trying to dig in. Nothing. His eyes darkened, storm turning rougher. You're an Omega, he said, slower this time, as if the word itself might force a reaction. You're supposed to lie down, roll over, beg? I supplied helpfully. You really did read the booklet. Respond to command. Ouch, I said. No wonder they sent you here to fix Haven Rock. You talk like a training manual. For the first time his composure cracked visibly. Anger flared bright in those golden eyes. He dropped my arm, stepped back as if putting distance would help him make sense of what his senses were failing to report. He inhaled, deeper now. Trying to catch what should have been obvious. No sweet Omega scent. No comforting undertone. Just salt, old wood, coffee and me, a blank space where instinct expected a pattern. His nostrils flared once, then went still. There's no scent, he said. I wiggled my fingers in a little ta-da between us. Congratulations, I said. Your nose works. Better sit down. That's a big realization before breakfast. His gaze snapped to mine. What happened to you? He asked. The way he said it, not disgusted, not curious, but like a man staring at a broken compass, and wondering what exactly wrecked the needle, made something tight coil in my chest. Not now. I shrugged, breaking eye contact, turning toward the interior as if unconcerned. Some people are just born disappointing, I said lightly. You still going to search, or are we going to stand here and stare at each other until the tide comes in? He recovered fast. I'll give him that. He stepped farther inside, boots thumping on the boards, attention sweeping the clutter. He scanned the charts pinned to the wall, the annotated routes that didn't exist on any legal registry. His hand hovered a moment over a marked path that curved far from official shipping lanes, through narrow, treacherous rocks. You draw these? He asked. Mostly the rocks, I said. The water does the rest. His jaw set. These are smuggler routes, he said. You're navigating for them. Or, I said, I like drawing lines. It's how I self-soothe. Some people do yoga, overseer. I commit cartographic crimes. He moved toward the old metal cabinet against the far wall. The lock rusted but still functioning if you knew its trick. My spine prickled. He reached for it. Okay. That was enough. Yeah, no, I said, slipping between him and the cabinet, plastering my back casually against it like I was just stretching. Off limits. That door sticks. You'll hurt your delicate counsel fingers. His brows rose slowly. Step aside. Make me. He didn't say anything. He just reached for his belt. For one horrible second I thought he was about to prove me right about all alphas and their commands. Then I saw the metal glint. Not a weapon. Restraint band. Matte black, humming faintly with the kind of tech only council enforcers were supposed to carry. The kind that could dampen shifting, anchor you in place, send a warning ping straight up the chain if you tried to run. Wow, I said. Moving very fast for a first meeting. You don't even know my favorite color. Kael, he said. My name in his mouth sounded like a verdict. Under council orders, you're being detained pending investigation. Present your wrists. No. His eyes narrowed. That wasn't a request. Yeah, I said, heart kicking up, that's the problem. He stepped into my space, close enough that the storm smell of him flooded my senses. The band dangled loosely from his fingers, ready to snap closed in an instant. The weight of his alpha presence dropped again, harder, like he was trying to force it through the burned-out pathways in me. My pulse jumped, not from the pressure, from memory. Cold stone. Bright symbols. Hands pressing down. A different alpha's voice saying, don't fight it. It'll be easier if you don't fight. I swallowed hard, throat suddenly dry. Not here. Not again. Give me your wrists, Rose said quietly. No, I said again, more sharply than I intended. His gaze searched my face, as if looking for the flinch, the crack, the submissive crumble that was supposed to come next. It didn't. Instead I smiled, thin and sharp. If you want them, I said, you'll have to catch me. And then I moved. I ducked under his arm, dropping low, shoulder brushing his hip as I slid past. The movement was pure muscle memory. Decks in a storm, ducking under, swinging ropes, slipping through narrow gaps between angry crew. The old boards complained under my bare feet as I bolted toward the back of the room. Kael. His voice snapped after me like a leash. Don't run. Bad with instructions, I called over my shoulder. Ask anyone. The back wall of the lighthouse looked solid to anyone who hadn't grown up around smugglers. Paint peeled from warped planks, a stack of crates sat crookedly in one corner. I shoved one aside with my foot, fingers finding the hidden notch in the panel behind it. Wood gave with a familiar groan. Stop, Ro ordered. The word hit the air like a command shot. My body did exactly nothing. I slipped through the narrow opening as the panel shifted, the smell of damp stone and seaweed rising from the hidden passage beyond. The air was colder here, slick against my skin, the sound of waves suddenly louder. Behind me, heavy bootsteps crossed the floor fast. Kael. Overseer, I threw back, already half down the tight staircase spiraling into the cliff. If you break your neck following me, I'm not filling out the incident report. The passage was barely wide enough for my shoulders, carved roughly into the rock long before I was born. Lanterns I'd hung at intervals swung gently with the rush of air, smearing light over the wet stone. The stairs dropped steeply, winding toward the base of the cliff where the sea bit at the rock. I took them two at a time. The wind hit me like a slap when I burst out onto the narrow ledge at the bottom. Waves crashed against the rocks below, sending up bursts of cold spray that kissed my face and bare ankles. The sky was a bruised gray, dawn still dragging itself over the horizon. Out here, the lighthouse loomed above like a crooked tooth against the sky. Out here, there were a dozen narrow paths only a fool or a local would trust. Lucky for me, I was both. I darted onto the slick stone path curving along the cliff, toes gripping for purchase. Spray dampened my sweater, flattened my hair to my forehead. The air tasted clean and sharp and alive. Behind me, Ro emerged from the passageway. He didn't hesitate at the ledge, just took it in, assessed the danger, and followed. Of course he did. "Get back here!" he shouted, voice cutting through the roar of waves. "Can't," I yelled back. "I'm very busy not being detained." The path narrowed ahead, dropping toward a lower shelf of rock. I jumped down, landing hard, knees bending to take the impact. Pain jolted up my legs, but adrenaline smoothed it over. Bootsteps pounded behind me, closer now. He was fast. I'll give him that. I risked a quick glance back. Ro moved like he'd been built for this coastline. Balanced, sure-footed, coat fanning out behind him like a shadow. Spray hit his face and he didn't even blink, eyes locked on me. There was no bureaucratic distance there now. No chilly professionalism, just focus. And a glint of something sharp and wild. Stormfront, indeed. A wave surged higher than the rest, slamming against the cliff and splashing over the path. Cold water soaked my legs, almost enough to knock me sideways. I grabbed at the rock, fingers scraping rough stone. Ro swore, the first crack in his perfect composure, as the same wave hit him, forcing him to brace. Our gazes met across the narrow path, water pouring off both of us. For a heartbeat, it felt like the whole world balanced on that ledge with us. The sea growled below. The lighthouse watched above. His aura pushed. Mine remained stubbornly blank, like a cut wire. He looked at me like he didn't know what exactly I was, but he was absolutely going to find out. I flashed him a grin I didn't entirely feel. "Careful, overseer," I called. "You fall, you'll ruin that very intimidating coat." He bared his teeth. Not a smile, not quite a snarl. For the first time he sounded less like the council's polished mouthpiece and more like a man with a temper. "Kael," he growled. "This isn't a game." Thunder rumbled somewhere far out at sea, answering him. I turned away before I could think too hard about any of it and sprinted along the rocks, letting the wind slice the rest of my hesitation away. The overseer didn't know it yet, but he wasn't hunting an omega. He was hunting a ghost someone tried very hard to erase. Haven Rock always looked better from a distance. From the lighthouse, the town was just a cluster of roofs and smoke, and faint lantern lights pressed against the gray line of the shore. Pretty, in a postcard from somewhere you don't actually want to live kind of way. Up close, it was fish. Fish, and damp wood, and the sour tang of old ale clinging to the narrow streets. Wooden walkways groaned under every step. Laundry lines webbed the alleys like someone had tried to catch the fog and gave up halfway. People here moved with their heads down. Not because they were humble, because they knew they were watched. By day, Haven Rock pretended to be a normal fishing town, just another forgotten stain on the coastline. By night, shutters slammed shut the second the sun bled out. Doors bolted like heartbeat valves. Lanterns dimmed. Scent patrols slid through the fog, enforcers in long coats, noses up, searching. Wolves, pretending to be rumor. I kept my hood up and my hands in my pockets, navigating the wooden walkways like I'd been born on them. Technically I'd been born much farther inland. But this was the first place that ever felt like it fit, broken edges and all. The market sat on a crooked square near the docks, where the planks had warped enough to collect rainwater in shallow dips. Stalls leaned against each other like drunk relatives. The morning rush had thinned. Only a few vendors still called half-heartedly to passing customers. "Rotten crabs, 3 for a coin." One woman shouted. "Fresh." I said fresh. A cat stared at her from under a crate, deeply unconvinced. I slipped between two stalls, ducking under a sagging tarp until the smell of fish was overpowered by something more comforting: dust, metal, and old smoke. Marin's place. If the town had a junkyard, it was his stall. Piles of everything. Gears, cracked oil lamps, tangled lengths of chain, chipped mugs, a box of unpaired boots he swore would find their soulmates eventually. "Morning, old man," I said, pushing aside a dangling cluster of metal spoons. Marin snorted without looking up. "Don't morning me, boy," he grumbled, poking at a rusty lantern with a stick like it might bite. His shoulders were hunched, gray hair sticking up around his bald spot like sea foam. It's barely past dawn, and I already had to see 3 council coats, and one of them was too handsome for my nerves. It's a bad omen, I tell you. Tragic, I said. Should I come back when the omens improve? He finally squinted up at me, brown eyes bright in his wrinkled face. "Depends," he said. "You bringing trouble with you today, Kael? Or just your usual questionable decisions?" "Little of both." I leaned on the rickety counter. "I need oil for a lamp. Any replacement wicks you have that don't smell like death when they burn and—" "No," he said immediately. "You don't even know what I was going to ask." "You were going to ask for something that doesn't technically exist," he said. "And I am too old to be arrested this week." I grinned. "What?" I said. "You scared of the new overseer already?" Marin's mouth twisted like he'd bitten a lemon. "Scared? Ha!" He glanced around, lowered his voice anyway. "I'm annoyed is what I am. He's been stomping around since sunrise, all straight back and golden eyes and council manners, asking questions, checking records, like he owns the place. Sounds like his brand," I said. "He's too strict," Marin went on. "Too tidy. The last overseer slept through half the patrols and only cared if the bribes arrived on time. That was a man you could live with. This one," he jerked his chin toward the upper streets. "This one is trouble. And he's too young to know any better." "And?" I asked. Because his tone said there was more. "And," Marin grumbled, "he's too pretty. Men that pretty are never here to do you any good. Makes people stupid." "Relax," I said. "Some of us were already stupid before he got here." Marin snorted, but his gaze sharpened. "You had a run-in with him yet?" he asked. I tugged my hood a little lower, imagining Rose's storm-dark eyes, the way his aura had crashed against me and broken like a wave on rock. "A little," I said. "He came by the lighthouse." Marin hissed through his teeth. "And you're still walking free?" he demanded. "Either you're luckier than you look, or he's not as competent as he thinks." "Third option," I said. "I'm very charming." He laughed once. A dry bark. "I heard he's been asking for records," he said, rummaging through a crate until he unearthed a small bottle of lamp oil. "Looking at every arrival log, every name, every little paper the council's rats love so much." My stomach did an uncomfortable little flip. "Yeah?" I asked lightly. "Good thing I'm entirely law-abiding." Marin snorted again, clearly not buying it. "Word is," he went on, "he was down at the registry office this morning. Had the scribe sweating. Kept asking about a Kael, living at the North Beacon. They pulled your file. Name, age, origin. All there." He paused, giving me a sharp look. Status line was blank. I forced a laugh. Maybe they got tired halfway through writing disappointment. Marin didn't laugh back. "Blank. Kael," he repeated. "As in, erased. Someone with rank did that. On purpose." The square felt colder for a moment. The fog pressed closer. I shrugged, like my heart hadn't just skipped. "Then maybe I'm finally free of being categorized. Isn't that the dream?" I said. "How much for the oil?" Marin sighed, muttering something about smart-mouthed idiots and wolves with too many secrets. But he named a price, and I paid, letting the rhythm of the exchange steady my thoughts. If Ro was digging, he'd find my name. He just wouldn't like how the rest of the lines looked. On my way out of the market, someone caught my sleeve. The hand was thin, fingers knotted with age but surprisingly firm. I turned and found myself face to face with a woman who had not been there a second ago. At least my eyes insisted she hadn't. She stood in the shadow of a stone pillar, layers of faded shawls wrapped around her narrow shoulders. Her hair was white and long, braided and then braided again, hanging like a rope down her back. Her eyes, if you could call them that, were milky, filmed over completely, pupils lost in clouded white. "Excuse me," I started, automatically polite. "Can the first—" "Still talking too much," she said, voice scratchy as dry leaves. "You smell like the sea and burnt iron." I froze. Most people in Haven Rock smelled like something. Fish, ale, oil, anxiety, wolves tracked by scent and whisper. Me? Normally I registered as background if anything at all. Do I know you? I asked carefully. You don't. She tilted her head, moving closer like she was listening to something only she could hear. But I know what's wrapped around you. It was ridiculous, how my skin prickled at that. Look, grandmother, I said lightly, if you're about to sell me a good luck charm, I should warn you, the last one I bought didn't work. I still live in a lighthouse with the personality of a dying goat. Her hand slid down my sleeve, bone-like fingers closing around my wrist. Everything in me wanted to pull back. I didn't. Her fingertips were surprisingly warm. She traced the inside of my wrist, following veins, mapping old scars. Her brows furrowed, like she was listening with her hands, not her ears. There, she whispered. There it is. Okay, I said. That's either very profound, or very creepy, and I'm not sure which yet. She ignored me. Your chain is not broken, she murmured, more to herself than to me. It is burned out. There is a difference. My throat went tight. I tried to tug my hand back then. Her grip tightened with surprising strength. I don't have a chain, I said. You've got the wrong guy. She tilted her head again, cloudy eyes fixing somewhere near my face. Wolf without a scent, she said softly. Omega without a pull. The ritual didn't cut you loose. It scorched you. Left the collar with no leash attached. Her mouth twisted. That's worse. My heartbeat slammed loud in my ears. Who are you? I asked, unable to keep my voice as light as before. People call me Elva, she said. Witch, hag, nuisance. I listen to what others can't hear. Great, I said, swallowing. You should stop listening to me. The reception is terrible. You think this makes you free? She asked, ignoring that. This emptiness? No scent, no response, no pull to anyone? Yes, I said, too fast. Her fingers finally released my wrist. I pulled back like I'd been burned, rubbing the skin where she'd touched, even though it didn't hurt. Freedom is a choice, Elva said quietly. Not just an absence. I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't want to know. By late afternoon the fog had thickened into something that could almost be called rain if it ever committed fully. Lanterns were already flickering to life along the docks when I made my way toward the water. Haven Rock's port wasn't impressive. A series of wooden piers stuck out like splinters into the gray sea, boats of various legality tied up to them. Fisher skiffs, yes. But also sleeker ships with no names painted on their sides, crews that never lingered long enough to gossip. The sunset bled through the cloud cover in streaks of red and gold, turning the water into something almost beautiful. I stood at the edge of one of the piers, hands in my pockets, watching a gull argue with a piece of driftwood. You run well, a voice said behind me. I didn't jump, not externally anyway. Please, I said, staring out at the water. If you're going to sneak up on people, at least jingle or something. Put a bell on your coat, offer a warning. Bootsteps thudded on the planks. The air shifted as Ro came to stand beside me. He didn't crowd my space this time. Just close enough that I could feel the edge of his presence, the way the air got thicker around him. His coat was the same as that morning, black and neat, somehow untouched by the damp. His hair was a little mussed, like he'd been running his hands through it. I wasn't sneaking, he said. You were distracted. Arguable, I said. Maybe I just didn't consider you a threat. His gaze flicked over me, taking in the hood, the worn boots, the way I leaned my weight on one leg. And yet you ran from me this morning, he said. Unusual behavior for someone who feels no threat. Maybe I'm easily bored, I said. You did start reading legal orders at me at sunrise. That's harsh, even for my attention span. A nearby ship creaked against its moorings. The gull gave up on the driftwood and took off, screeching its disappointment to the world. I've been asking questions, Ro said after a moment. About you. Congratulations, I said. How does it feel, discovering I'm the least interesting man in Haven Rock? He ignored that. The registry lists your arrival 3 years ago, he said. Name, Kael Varen, age, 22 at the time. Origin, Inland Territories. It also lists your designation. My shoulders tightened under my coat. You going to say it like a curse? I asked. We already did that game this morning. His eyes were on the water, but I could feel his attention like a physical thing. Omega, he said simply. But the status line on your record is struck out. The entry is incomplete. No corresponding bond, no recorded scent profile. Someone erased that data intentionally. I forced a smile. Maybe the clerk spilled coffee on it. Someone filed an override request, he continued, as if I hadn't spoken. Council level. That doesn't happen by accident. The red light of the lowering sun painted the side of his face, catching in his eyes, turning them almost molten. You are an Omega with no visible chain, he said. No scent, no response to Alpha command, no documented bond. That combination shouldn't exist. Good news, I said lightly. I've always been an overachiever. He finally turned his head fully to look at me. Explain, he said. I huffed a small laugh. Authority really is your love language, huh? I said. Not, how do you feel about this? Not, are you okay? Just explain like I'm a misbehaving cadet. If your condition is the result of a forbidden ritual, he said, voice quiet but steady, it could endanger the balance here. Haven Rock is fragile. The council expects me to maintain order. There it is, I said softly. The speech about order. Without discipline, he said. A town like this rots. Smugglers, black markets, rogue packs. And Omegas who don't roll over when you tell them to, I cut in. He fell silent. The waves slapped against the pier. A slow, stubborn rhythm. And what if I do endanger your precious balance, Overseer? I asked, tilting my head, letting a smile ghost over my lips. What then? Do you chain me up yourself? Ship me back to whatever lab I fell out of? His jaw tightened. I don't know yet, he admitted. Honest. Unexpected. And that bothers you, I said. Yes, he said. I turned fully toward him then, closing the distance by a step. Then another, until we were close enough that I had to tip my chin up slightly to meet his eyes. His aura washed over me, automatic, a reaction to proximity. Heavy. Commanding. The subtle push of an alpha used to people bending around him like reeds. It hit me, and slid right off, finding nothing to hook into. Up this close I could see the faint scar at his jaw, the small line between his brows that said he frowned more than he smiled. His scent curled around us, storm, steel, the barest hint of something. Warmer, underneath that he probably never let anyone close enough to name. Try it, I said quietly. His eyes darkened. Kael. If you're so worried about what I am, I said, test it. Use what you've got. There was a tension in him now that had nothing to do with anger. His throat bobbed once as he swallowed. This is not a game, he said. It's a demonstration, I said. Go on, tell me to kneel, to lower my eyes, to apologize for hurting your sense of order. He held my gaze for a long, charged second. The air between us thickened, his presence intensifying until it pressed against my skin like a storm front. Look down, he said low. Command threaded through the words, the kind of alpha tone that would. They've sent older parts of me scrambling to obey once upon a time. I didn't move. My heart beat a little too fast. Not from the order. From the fact that I was defying one again. That I could. His aura pushed harder, trying to find purchase, some hook, some instinct, some thread to pull. Nothing. My head stayed up. My eyes stayed on his. Rose's nostrils flared. His pupils widened, not with dominance this time, with something like shock. Slowly, deliberately, I tilted my chin even higher. There, I said softly. Do you see why your manual is out of date with me? For a second the world shrank to golden eyes and the sound of both our breaths. His hand flexed at his side, as if resisting the urge to reach for me or shove me away, I wasn't sure which. An Omega who does not respond to command, he said, like he was reciting a new law he hated. Who does not scent, does not yield, does not bond. Sounds like a nightmare, I said. For people who like things neat. It's a threat, he said. To hierarchy. To the structure that keeps this place from tearing itself apart. Then you should probably stay away from me, I said, letting a real smile break through this time. For the sake of your structure. His gaze dropped, just for a heartbeat, to my mouth. Dangerous. When he looked back up, his expression was different. The rigid certainty had cracked. Something behind it watched me with a focus that wasn't purely professional. You're not afraid, he said quietly. I was, once, I said. They burned it out of me along with everything else. A muscle ticked in his cheek. That's not freedom, Kael, he said. I shrugged. It's close enough, I lied. He stepped back then, just enough to let the air between us cool, his aura retreating like a tide pulled by some internal discipline. We'll speak again, he said. Looking forward to it, I said lightly. You're the most interesting thing that's happened to this town since the fish shortage 2 winters ago. He turned and walked down the pier, coat shifting around his legs, attention already ticking to some new problem, some new report waiting for him. But as he reached the end of the planks, he glanced back over his shoulder, just once, like a man who'd seen something impossible, and couldn't quite decide whether it was a threat, a miracle, or both. If the overseer really wanted order, he should have stayed far away from me. The sea sounded different at night. By day it was all noise and motion. Waves slapping rocks, gulls screaming about their problems, boats creaking like old bones. At night, when the fog rolled in and the lanterns along the docks went out one by one, the ocean lowered its voice. It stopped shouting and started whispering. I liked it better that way. The moon hung low over Haven Rock, a pale imperfect coin smudged by clouds. Its light painted the water in long, broken strokes, silver rippling over black. Fog coiled along the shoreline, thick enough that the town behind me was just a suggestion of roofs and chimneys. I stood where the sand gave way to rock, boots half buried in cold grit, hands shoved into my pockets. The air tasted clean here, salt and damp stone, and something sharp enough to scrape rust off the inside of my skull. The day had been too long. Too many looks. Too many whispers about the new overseer, about records and patrols, and things that used to be able to ignore me but suddenly didn't. I'd spent the last hours pretending it didn't bother me. The ocean was harder to lie to. I'm fine, I told it anyway. You're very judgmental for a giant puddle. The surf hissed against the rocks, unimpressed. I closed my eyes and let the wind push at me, rocking on my heels, steadying myself on the only constant I trusted. The lighthouse loomed behind me somewhere up the cliff, a dark tooth against the sky, its lamp unlit. No one had asked me to turn it on in years. Kael. Rose's voice slipped through the sound of the water so cleanly that for a second I thought I'd imagined it. My shoulders tensed on instinct, even as the rest of me stayed loose. Of course he'd know how to walk quiet. I opened my eyes and didn't turn right away. Let him come closer. Let his presence spread along the shore like pressure before a storm. You know, I said, one of these days I'm going to start charging you for all this dramatic shoreline stalking. Overseers probably get paid well. I could use the money. Bootsteps, slow and steady, stopped a few strides away. I finally glanced over. He wasn't in the full polished uniform this time. No heavy coat, no formal gloves. Just dark trousers, a fitted sweater, sleeves pushed up to his forearms, like he'd walked off duty and straight into the fog before anyone could stop him. His hair was damp at the ends, as if the mist had been chewing on it. He still carried the storm with him. But tonight, it felt less like a wall and more like weather he didn't quite know how to control. You avoid me during the day, he said by way of greeting. You're harder to avoid at night. That sounds like a compliment, I said. I'm going to take it as one. He looked at me for a long moment, the moonlight catching in his eyes, turning them an uncanny pale gold. What are you, Kael? He asked quietly. And don't say annoying again. What, we're skipping small talk? I said. No. How was your day? Did you eat? Any existential crises lately? The system should respond to you, he said, as if I hadn't spoken. My instincts should respond to you, none of it does. When I put pressure on you, nothing happens. That's not just irregular. It's impossible. I snorted. Welcome to Haven Rock, I said. We have fog, fish, and a local impossible thing. Very on brand. He took a step closer. Not close enough to crowd, but close enough that his aura brushed over my skin, testing. Again, that blankness where something should have been. Rose's jaw tightened. You should be afraid of me, he said. Of what I represent. Of what I could do. I've met what you represent, I said, eyes on the dark line where sky met sea. And I've met what the system could do. You're mildly upsetting in comparison. And yet you ran from me, he said. Twice. I run from boredom, I said, and bureaucracy. Sometimes those wear very attractive faces. But it doesn't change the core issue. He reached for me then, too fast for me to sidestep gracefully without tripping over seaweed. His hand closed around my wrist, warm and solid. The pressure that came with the touch was instinctive, a pushing, a coaxing, meant to make smaller bodies go still. Mine didn't. My pulse jumped, but only because having someone grab your wrist on a dark beach is a little bit intense, no matter how broken you are. I looked down at his fingers on my skin, then up at his face. Careful, I said softly. You keep doing that, people will talk. His grip tightened. You're not reacting, he said. Not even a little. I am reacting, I said. internally, very dramatically. You just can't see it. I cry on the inside. Don't, he snapped. That startled me enough that my brows shot up. Don't what? I asked. Don't make a joke out of this, he said. His voice wasn't stern overseer now. It was raw, scraped thin around the edges. This isn't a quirk or a trick. Something was done to you. Something that should not be possible under the council's nose. I am supposed to understand threats. And I don't understand you. His thumb brushed against the inside of my wrist as he said it, like he was searching for a pulse. Or a leash. That's the point, I said quietly. I was designed to be understood, measured, controlled. That didn't work out. Now I'm misfiled paperwork. A bad line of code. Why are you so bothered by 1 Omega the system can't catalog? Because the system is already weaker than it admits, he said. Because this town is a pressure point. Smugglers, rogues, old rituals in the cracks. One unpredictable element is enough to make everything fall sideways. And you're here to make sure everything stays upright, I said. Yes. And you think I'm enough to knock it over? He hesitated. The wind shifted, bringing his scent to me more clearly. Storm, steel, and under it something tired. Not physically. In the way of someone who has held themselves rigid for too long. A hierarchy only works if everyone agrees on their place, he said. An Omega, who can ignore command, who doesn't scent, doesn't submit. You're a tear in the pattern. I didn't ask to be, I said. His gaze met mine, steady and sharp. What happened to you? He asked. I exhaled slowly. The ocean whispered against the rocks, patient. I thought the council didn't care about personal history, I said. Just whether the boxes are checked. The council doesn't, he said. I do. You keep saying things that almost sound kind, I said. It's confusing. Kael. Hearing my name like that, not a label, not a readout on a file, but a question, did something strange in my chest. It's not a fun story, I warned. No inspirational lesson at the end. Tell it anyway. His fingers were still around my wrist. I could have pulled away. I didn't. Fine, I said. You want contraband truth? Here. I looked back out over the water, letting my eyes unfocus until the moonlight on the waves turned into scattered pieces. I wasn't born here, I started. You know that much already. Inland pack, not big, not small. We ran routes instead of borders. Caravans, shipments. Things that weren't supposed to cross certain lines but did. I had good instincts, they said. Nose for weather and trouble. Smugglers, Rose said quietly. That's such a harsh word, I said. We preferred creative logisticians. Despite himself, his mouth twitched. I was useful, I went on. That's the important part. Omegas are always useful if you manage them right, isn't that what the manuals say? We scent danger. We soothe tempers. We fit. The alpha of our little enterprise decided that wasn't enough. A memory slid up my spine like cold fingers. Symbols carved into stone. A room that smelled of herbs and metal and something scorched. He wanted me on a permanent leash, I said. No chance of me deciding I was tired of being useful and leaving. So he dug up something old. A ritual. Not council-sanctioned. The kind that survived in whispers and half-remembered packets. Passed hand to hand because you're not supposed to write it down. Rose's grip loosened just a fraction. Like he was afraid of holding too tightly and fracturing something already cracked. They told me it was a bonding, I said. That I'd feel safe, anchored, that my instincts would have one place to belong. When you're young and desperate for any kind of belonging, that sounds a lot like mercy. Did you agree? He asked. That's the thing about being raised in a pack, I said. If you're Omega, the line between agree and don't argue is blurry. The moon slipped behind a cloud for a moment, dimming the world. I remember the circle on the floor, I said softly. The way my skin crawled when they started chanting. I remember the alpha's hand on the back of my neck. Pressure, command, the promise that if I just let go, it would be easier. Rose's aura had gone very still. Listening. It went wrong, I said. Or right, depending on who you are and what you wanted. The pull that was supposed to latch onto him hit something and burned through instead. It didn't snap the chain, it melted it. Left the collar fused to bone, and nothing on the other end. My throat felt tight. The words scraped coming out. I woke up with no bond, I said. No scent anyone could read, no natural response to command, just silence where instinct used to be. Everyone in the room looked at me like I was a broken tool. Dangerous and useless at the same time. Silence stretched between us, full of too many things. What did they do? Ro asked finally. What do you think? I said. You can't sell defective goods at full price. They tried to repeat the ritual. It didn't work. The second time I didn't stay. I didn't describe running. The way the air tastes when you don't believe you're going to see another sunrise. The sound of your own breath louder than every footstep behind you. I made it as far as the coast, I said. Haven Rock was the first place I found where the council's eyes weren't on every alley. Where a lighthouse nobody wanted anymore was happy to lean a little crooked and pretend I wasn't there. And the pack? He asked. Either they wrote me off as lost, I said, or they decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Until recently no one came looking. You think that will change, he said. I think old mistakes have a way of washing back up eventually, I said. You asked what I am, Overseer. That's your answer. I am something the system tried to break into obedience. It miscalculated. When I finally looked back at him, expecting disgust or horror, or at least the professional distance of a man mentally filing me under problem, his expression was neither. There was anger there, but not aimed at me. The council writes regulations, he said slowly. Packs write their own laws on top of them. Most of the time I tell myself it works, that the structure is better than nothing. What you're describing isn't structure, it's abuse dressed up in ritual. You say that like you're surprised, I said. My voice came out rougher than I wanted. You've really never seen the system eat someone and call it maintenance? I've seen it, he said. Too many times. I just thought if I followed the rules hard enough, I could keep it from happening again. Tighten the gaps, rein in the worst of it. But this... He shook his head once. This slipped through every net I believed in. For the first time he looked less like a storm, and more like a man caught in one without a map. You hate it, I realized, the pieces clicking in my head. The system. Not just what happened to me. All of it. He met my gaze. I hate that it works the way it does, he said. I don't know how to make it better without ripping it apart completely and leaving people at the mercy of something worse. That's the problem with structures, isn't it? I said. Pull the wrong beam, the whole thing comes down. Leave it alone and it rots on top of you. And you, he said quietly, are a loose beam. Flattering, I said. You make me sound important. Before he could answer, the wind shifted again. The ocean's whisper changed pitch, turning sharper, like teeth biting through cloth. The hair on the back of my neck rose for an entirely different reason. We weren't alone on the shore anymore. Out of the fog, shapes coalesced. 3 figures, moving with a familiarity that made my stomach drop before my eyes finished confirming what my nose couldn't. I knew that walk, that predatory looseness, the way they spread out without thinking, flanking. My mouth went dry. Speak of old mistakes, I muttered. Ro's grip on my wrist vanished, only to reappear lower, steadying my elbow as he shifted his stance just a fraction to put more of himself between me and the approaching silhouettes. Friends of yours? He asked, voice gone flat. Depends on your definition, I said. They used to be my co-workers, employer, sentence enhancers. Hard to pick a label. As they stepped into the smeared moonlight, faces emerged. Different haircuts. New scars. But the same eyes. You run far, pup, the one in front said, voice carrying easily over the surf. His smile showed too many teeth. We were starting to think the sea swallowed you. My heart hammered against my ribs. Old instincts tried to crawl out of their graves and failed. Behind me, Ro's aura snapped from uncertain storm to something honed and lethal. Overseer, I said under my breath. Before you say something about jurisdiction, you should know these men don't care. I gathered, he said, tone dry. You're making this complicated, Kael, the leader called. You were supposed to come back when we called. The Alpha isn't pleased, he wants his investment fixed. He'll have to file a complaint, I said. Louder than I felt. I'm on a strict no-return policy. They started to move again, slow and easy, closing the distance like this was a casual stroll and not a retrieval. Ro stepped forward, putting himself fully between us now. This shore is under council protection, he said, voice like cut stone. Turn around and leave. Now. The 3 of them laughed. Council dog. The leader sneered. We heard they sent a new one. You don't smell like you've been here long. You don't smell like you belong here at all, Ro said. His aura flared, not as precise as earlier, not measured. Raw. The push of an alpha who wasn't issuing a command. He was promising violence. It hit them. All 3 stiffened, instincts snapping to attention. Mine. Buzzed. Somewhere far away, like a radio tuned to a station that no longer broadcast. Last warning, Ro said. Cute, the leader said. You think this is your territory. You think that broken thing behind to guard. Something in me jolted at that. Broken thing. Don't, Ro said. Just that. One word, low and dangerous in a way I hadn't heard from him yet. Then everything happened at once. The closest man lunged, shifting partially mid-step, bones cracking, claws flashing in the half-light. Ro moved to meet him, faster than I'd ever seen him move, the human shape of him bending around an impact that should have taken him off his feet. I stumbled back, nearly slipping on wet stone, heart slamming against my ribs. For a split second I considered running, not because I was afraid of them, because the last time I'd seen my past and my present collide in one place. It ended with a circle drawn on the floor, and my autonomy burning away. Not this time. Ro was a blur, a snarl ripping out of his chest that had nothing to do with council manners. He slammed an elbow into one attacker's throat, pivoted, kicked another's knee out from under him. The third circled, looking for an opening, teeth bared, half-shifted jaw distended. They hadn't expected this. They'd expected a council dog, all bark and procedural bite. What they got was a predator who'd been waiting for an excuse. The leader crashed into him shoulder first. Ro hit the sand, rolled, came up with blood on his jaw and murder in his eyes. His control slipped, just enough that the full weight of his presence crashed over the beach. Even I felt it, dimly, like heat through glass. Kael! One of them shouted. Call him off, or we drag both of you back. I laughed, breathless. As if I've ever been able to make an alpha do anything, I said. Ro's fist connected with the leader's ribs. There was a crack I felt in my teeth. The man wheezed, stumbling. One of the others tried to dart around toward me. Ro saw it. Rage snapping through him like lightning. He intercepted, taking a claw across his forearm to block a strike aimed for my throat. Hot, sharp scent hit the air. Blood, bright and fresh. My vision tunneled for a second. He didn't even seem to notice. Just drove his opponent back with a ferocity that looked nothing like regulation. He wasn't fighting like a man protecting an asset of the council. He was fighting like... Don't think it. Don't name it. Enough, the leader rasped, finally staggering upright. His gaze flicked between us, calculating. This isn't worth the mess. The alpha will hear about this, pup. About your little pet enforcer. Tell him I said hi, I said. And that his ritual sucked. The leader's lip curled. Then he whistled once, sharp. The other two fell back, muscles coiled and resentful, but obedient. They retreated into the fog the same way they'd emerged, like they belonged to it. Ro stood very still until their shapes vanished completely. His chest rose and fell, breath loud in the sudden quiet. Blood dripped from his forearm, dark against pale skin. Are you okay? I asked, voice coming out thinner than I liked. He turned to look at me. His eyes were still a little wild. Not feral, just unleashed. You should have run, he said. No, I said. I did enough of that already. We stared at each other across a strip of wet sand, the tide creeping closer, erasing prints as it went. He'd moved without thinking. Put himself between me and my past like it was the only logical choice. He hadn't weighed council protocol or political consequences. He hadn't been protecting an Omega. He'd been protecting me. And that was far more terrifying. Ro didn't notice he was bleeding until his knees decided for him. The smugglers disappeared into the fog with their threats still hanging in the air. For a moment the only sounds were the surf and our breathing, both louder than they had any right to be. Then Ro took a step toward me. Just one. His shoulder hitched, his balance faltered, and the next thing I knew. The overseer of Haven Rock, the council's storm in a black coat, the man who just fought off 3 half-shifted wolves like it was. A warm-up drill, staggered like a drunk and went down to one knee. Okay, I said, too sharply. No. I crossed the strip of wet sand between us fast, boots slipping. Up close, it was worse. The slash across his forearm was bad enough, but the real damage was higher. 4 deep claw marks, tearing through his sweater, and into the muscle of his shoulder, oozing dark sticky warmth. You didn't mention that, I said, voice climbing in pitch. Did you forget? How do you forget having half your shoulder rearranged? He blinked slowly, focusing on me like he had to drag his eyes across a long distance. Superficial, he said, which was a hilarious lie. I'll go to the station, get it cleaned. Sure, I said. Great plan. You can bleed all over the nice clean council floors. Maybe they'll frame it. I hooked an arm under his, trying to haul him up. It was like trying to lift a statue. A very heavy, very muscular, very wounded statue who did not understand the concept of leaning. Help, I grunted. You're not decorative stone. Put your legs to use. He made a sound that might have been a protest or a laugh strangled halfway through. I can walk, he said. Uh-huh, I said. Is that why you were auditioning for the role of tragic man collapsing in the surf? 10 out of 10, by the way. Very moving. Between my stubborn pulling and his grudging cooperation, we got him upright. He swayed, grit grinding under his boots. Station is... No, I cut in. Lighthouse first, it's closer. And has fewer people who will ask why you decided to tank 3 smugglers with your spleen. He opened his mouth, probably to argue about protocol. His legs chose that moment to remind him what claws felt like. He lurched again, and I tightened my grip. That, I said, was the sound of you running out of veto power. Congratulations. You're coming home with me. The climb up to the lighthouse usually didn't bother me. Tonight, with Rose's weight half slumped against my side, every uneven stone and steep step felt like a personal attack. You are, I panted, an impossible mountain of stubborn muscles. Stop, I huffed, adjusting my hold as he slipped. Stop trying to die aesthetically, it's rude. Are you complaining about my weight? He asked, words slightly slurred but still somehow offended. I'm complaining about the combination of your weight and your pride, I said. One of those I can work with. The other needs to take the night off. The lighthouse loomed ahead, its crooked silhouette a familiar comfort. I shouldered the door open with more force than grace, dragging him inside. The change in sound hit first, the howl of the wind dulled to a muted roar, waves becoming background instead of everything. Lamps I'd left low flickered weakly, throwing warm gold over peeling paint, maps, and the chaos of my life. Safe. Or as close as I got. Rose stumbled as I steered him toward the battered armchair near the table. Sit, I ordered. He gave me a look, somewhere between incredulous and amused. You don't respond to Alpha Command, he said, voice rough. But you expect me to respond to yours. Yes, I said. Because I'm smarter than you are right now and you're leaking on my floor. Sit. For once, he obeyed without argument, collapsing into the chair with a wince that he tried and failed to hide. His hand went to his shoulder, fingers brushing the torn fabric, coming away red. I need to, he began. Not bleed out? I said. Yes, good instinct. Hold that thought. I moved on autopilot, which was mostly denial with a side of practicality. Bucket. Clean water, as clean as I could manage. Cloth. The little stash of contraband medical supplies I kept tucked behind a false panel. Nothing council grade, but better than the sorry excuse for a first aid kit I'd been issued when I moved in. By the time I came back, he'd taken off his ruined sweater with his good hand, teeth gritted. The undershirt beneath it was soaked through on one side, clinging to the lines of his chest. The jagged tear on his shoulder an ugly angry thing. I stopped dead for half a second. He glanced up, misreading the silence. I've seen worse, he said. I haven't, I said, and set the bucket down harder than necessary so I'd have an excuse for the noise. Hold still. I can call for a council healer, he said. I shouldn't, you shouldn't. Oh, now you're worried about what the council thinks. I dipped the cloth in the water. You should have thought of that before you decided to body block my past with your vital organs. The first touch of wet cloth on raw skin made him flinch, muscles jumping under my hand. Sorry, I said automatically. It's fine, he said through his teeth. Do what you need to. That's a dangerous sentence to say to me, I muttered, but I was already working, wiping away blood as carefully as I could. The gashes were deep, but clean, more tearing than shredding. If they'd been a little lower, one might have caught his throat instead of his shoulder. The thought made my stomach roll. Kael, he said quietly. You're shaking. I realized I was. My hands. The cloth. The water in the bucket shivered with it, tiny ripples catching lamplight. I'm annoyed, I said. At the mess. At them, he said. At everyone, I said. Hold still. He did. The lighthouse hummed around us, wood creaking, waves thumping a steady rhythm against the rocks outside. The lamplight turned his skin gold where it wasn't smeared with red. Picked out the sharp line of his jaw, the tension in his throat. Does this hurt? I asked. pressing gently along the edge of the deepest cut. Yes, he said. Good, I said. If you stop feeling it, then I worry. He huffed a short, strained laugh. I didn't know you were capable of worrying about me, he said. Don't get used to it, I said. It's a limited time offer. He tried to sit straighter, stubborn alpha instincts refusing to let him sag. Stop that, I said, putting a hand on his uninjured shoulder and pushing him back against the chair. You look like you're about to recite regulations. Save the performance review for morning. You're bossy, he murmured. You're whiny, I said. We all have flaws. I cleaned until the blood slowed, and the wounds stopped looking like open doors for infection. Then I reached for the bandages, tearing strips with my teeth. Lift your arm, I said. He did, with difficulty. Muscle bunched and trembled. I stepped closer, wrapping the bandage around his shoulder and chest, needing to brace my hand on his ribs to pull it tight. Heat radiated off him, the steady thud of his heart under my palms startlingly solid. I tried not to think about how much space he took up in the room. How the storm of him felt muted now. Not because it had faded, but because he was tired enough to let some of the pressure bleed out. Who did it? He asked suddenly. At the risk of sounding ungrateful, I said, This is a terrible time for small talk. The ritual, he said. Your pack. Your alpha. Who did it to you? Why? I asked. Planning to send them a strongly worded letter? Planning, he said slowly. To understand the shape of the damage. So I know whether to look for it again. I tied off the bandage, fingers brushing his skin, then stepped back, rubbing my hands on my pants to get rid of the phantom sensation of warmth. You really don't let things go, do you? I said, No, he said simply. I sank down onto the low table across from him, ignoring the way it creaked in protest. For a moment we just sat there, facing each other. Him in my only decent chair, me perched on my improvised furniture, both of us held together by stubbornness and gauze. You asked earlier, he said. If I thought you were a threat. If I'd chain you myself. Yeah, I said. That was before you turned your shoulder into abstract art on my behalf. Might have misjudged your hobbies. His gaze softened, just a fraction. If there was a way to undo it, he said quietly. The ritual, the burning. Would you take it? My throat closed around nothing. I stared at him, at the way the lamplight turned his hair almost soft, at the edges, at the faint smear of blood he'd missed at his jaw. Don't play healer with me, overseer, I said. You're not equipped. It's a simple question, he said. No, I said. It isn't. His eyes didn't leave my face. Do you want your instincts back, Kael? He asked. The room felt suddenly too small. Too warm. I looked away, toward the nearest map pinned crooked on the wall, lines of ink blurring. I don't know who I'd be if they came back, I said slowly. I remember what it felt like. To want to roll over when told. To crave orders because they made things simpler. To need someone at my back so badly it hurt. And I remember how easy it was for them to twist that into a leash. But that was their choice, he said. Not the nature of the bond itself. Easy for you to say, I snapped. You were born on the other side of it. You were the one giving orders. The system was built for you, not on top of you. Silence fell heavy and awkward. I scrubbed a hand over my face. Sorry, I muttered. That was unfair. It was honest, he said. I exhaled, long and shaky. If my instincts come back, I said, voice small in a way I hated, what if I become exactly what they wanted? What if I wake up one day, and it feels good to obey again? To belong so hard I forget how to run? What if I look at you and I cut myself off, biting down on the words before they could betray more than I was ready to admit? Rose's expression shifted, something like understanding sharpening the edges. You think I want that, he said. Not a question. I laughed, short and brittle. You're an alpha, who lives and breathes order, I said. I'm a walking glitch. If there was a way to make me easier to slot somewhere on your little hierarchy chart, why wouldn't you take it? He was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. I don't want to command you, he said. I want to understand you. The words hit harder than any pressure he'd tried to throw at me. Something in my chest went very, very still, then cracked, hairline fractures racing through a shell I hadn't even realized I'd grown that thick. I looked at him. Really looked. At the man who'd followed me along a dangerous cliff path without hesitation. Who'd put himself between me and the pack that had marked me as defective. Who sat here now, wounded in my chair, telling me he'd rather figure me out than fix me. "You're terrible at feelings," I said weakly. "Probably," he said. "I don't get much practice." I huffed out a breath that might have been a laugh if it didn't shake. The space between us hummed, wires exposed, sparking. His breathing was uneven, more from pain and exhaustion now than from adrenaline. I could hear each inhale, each exhale, the rhythm threading through the crash of waves outside. I slid off the table onto the floor instead, leaning my back against the side of his chair. From there, I could feel the heat of him along my shoulder, steady as a furnace. Our arms brushed when either of us shifted even a little. We didn't speak for a while. I listened to his breath, to the creaks of the lighthouse, to the ocean carrying on like it hadn't just been witness to my past and my possible future colliding on the same strip of sand. "You should be in a bed," I said eventually. "So should you," he murmured. "I'll take the chair," I said. "I already have my favorite dent in it." He made a sound that might have been protest, then subsided. His head tipped back against the worn cushion. The tightening around his eyes eased by degrees as the worst of the pain dulled. His hand slid down from his bandaged shoulder, coming to rest near mine on the armrest. I didn't move mine away. "You should be more afraid of me," I said quietly, staring at our fingers, not quite touching. "Of what I bring with me." "I've met what you bring with you," he said, eyes half closed. "They bleed." "You bled," I pointed out. "Cost of doing my job," he said. "I've had worse nights." "That doesn't make me feel better," I muttered. "I didn't say it for you," he said. And I could hear the hint of a smile in it. "Try to sleep, Kael. The storm will come again tomorrow." "Comforting," I said. "You're terrible at that too." His answer was a low, tired huff. Gradually, his breathing evened out, rough edges smoothing. The weight of his presence thinned, not vanishing but settling, like a storm finally deciding not to tear the roof off tonight. His hand eased even closer to mine, knuckles brushing. I stared at the way our shadows overlapped on the floor, the lamplight painting us together in flickers. My chest hurt in a way that had nothing to do with claws or burned-out chains. He should have been afraid of me. Instead, he fell asleep in my bed. Storms come with warnings, if you know how to listen. The sea had been muttering all day, restless under a low, heavy sky. By dusk, the wind had picked up enough to make the lighthouse complain with every gust. By night, it wasn't complaining anymore. It was screaming. Lightning split the horizon in jagged white lines, turning the world into a series of harsh, stuttering frames. The ocean roared, throwing itself at the cliff like it had finally lost patience with the land. Inside the lighthouse, one of the shutters lost its will to live. The bang it made when the wind ripped it loose and slammed it against the wall nearly took 5 years off my life. "Stay!" I yelled at the window. "Because that's what sane people do. If you fall, I'm not climbing down to rescue you." From the armchair, wrapped in a blanket he pretended he didn't need, Ro looked up from the report he was pretending he wasn't reading. "You're talking to the building again," he said, voice still rough from too much blood loss and not enough rest. "I live here," I said. "We're in a committed relationship." Another gust hit. The whole structure shuddered, lamps swaying, shadows lurching over maps and clutter. Something rattled ominously upstairs. Ro started to push himself up. "Don't," I said quickly. "You're not storm-proof." "I should check the roof," he said. "If the lamp is currently off and going to stay that way," I cut in. "No one's using this beacon but me and the occasional smuggle." I coughed. "Legitimate merchant vessel." His brows arched. "Kael. If you go up there in your state," I said, pointing at him with the rag I'd been using to wipe condensation off the table, "you'll get knocked over like a very handsome, very regulation-compliant domino. Sit." He glared. The lighthouse thumped again. The wind howled. Lightning lit up the inside of the room for a heartbeat, washing the color out of everything. "It's getting worse," he said. "It'll pass," I said. "They always do." I didn't entirely believe myself. Storms were familiar, predictable, in their own violent way. I knew how to read them, how to count breaths between flash and thunder, how to listen to the way the waves shifted and tell whether the rocks would hold. Tonight, something was off. The pattern was wrong. The air felt crowded, like the storm wasn't the only thing pressing against the walls. I moved to the nearest window and wiped away a smear of condensation with the side of my hand. The glass vibrated under my palm. Outside, the world was a mess of rain, spray, and flashes of white. A bolt of lightning hit farther out to sea, illuminating the cliff path for a split second. 3 shapes standing where no one with sense would stand in this weather. And a 4th, farther back, still and straight, watching. My stomach dropped. "Of course," I whispered. "Of course you'd pick tonight." "What is it?" Ro asked. "Company," I said. "The unwelcome kind." By the time the thunder rolled over us, I was already moving. "Stay," I said over my shoulder, snatching my jacket off a hook. "Rest, grow new shoulder tissue. Overseer things." "Kael," he snapped, pushing to his feet. "Who is it?" Stormlight flashed again, stabbing through the windows. For an instant his face was all hard lines and shadows. The bandage under his shirt darkened where it pressed against the wound. He looked like someone who should be in a warm bed with hot tea and strict instructions, not chasing ghosts in a storm. "Pack business," I said. "Old ghosts. I'll handle it." He laughed once. It didn't have any humor in it. "You're not going out there alone," he said. "Yes," I said, "I am. Because if you step outside right now, that shoulder's going to open up again. And we'll be washing pieces of Overseer into the bay until morning." He was already crossing the room, stubbornness wrapped around him like another layer of clothing. "You have no command over me," he said. "Funny," I said. "I was about to say the same thing." Lightning flashed again, closer this time. The whole lighthouse trembled. Outside the storm screamed. Inside, 2 very stupid men glared at each other. "Fine," I said. Because I could do the math and I didn't like the answer. "Then stay behind me, and if you collapse I'm leaving you for the seagulls." His mouth twitched. "Noted," he said. We stepped out into the storm. Rain hit like thrown gravel, sharp and cold. The wind shoved hard enough that I had to brace against the doorframe for a second, blinking stinging water out of my eyes. The world beyond the flickering lantern over the doorway was blurred into wet gray and black. I could still feel them. Old habits don't die. They hunker down and wait. I led the way along the narrow path that circled the lighthouse, boots slipping a little on slick stone. The storm clawed at us, dragging at clothing, trying to push us back inside. Behind me, I heard Ro's footsteps, steady despite everything, his breath a little rougher than usual. "You should have stayed," I shouted over the wind. "Stop saying should," he shouted back. "It doesn't suit you." The cliff edge came into view. So did they. 3 familiar shapes. Hoods up, coats snapping in the wind. The same 2 from the beach and a third, bigger than both, bulk solid against the storm. And in front of them, steady as a nail driven into bone, stood Arion. He hadn't changed. Stormlight picked out the planes of his face in harsh white sharp cheekbones, dark eyes, hair pulled back tight. His coat was finer than the others, lined with something that repelled the rain. He stood with his hands clasped loosely behind his back, like this was a casual visit and not an ambush. Always composed. Always in control. "Kael," he called, voice cutting through the wind like it owned the air. "There you are. I was starting to think you'd become part of the furniture." Every muscle in my body tried to do something different at once. Run, bow, spit, laugh. I settled for walking forward, until I was close enough to see the small scar along his jaw that I'd once thought looked like a map line. "Arion," I said. "You look terrible. Storm's doing you no favors." He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "You've grown bold," he said. "For defective stock." Behind me, Ro bristled like a dog who just heard a stranger kick its person. His aura rose, half on instinct, pressing forward even as the wind tried to strip it away. "Former Alpha," I said. "Former Pack. Do try to keep up. We've had some staff changes." Arion's gaze shifted past me, assessing. "Ah," he said. "The Council's new pet. You've been busy, pup." Ro stepped up to stand at my side, not behind me. Lightning lit him up. Jaw set, eyes gold and sharp, rain plastering hair to his forehead. Shirt already soaking through where the bandage wrapped his chest underneath. "You're trespassing on Council jurisdiction," he said. "Leave." Arion laughed softly. "The Council," he said, "has no teeth out here without us. Haven Rock survives on our roots, our trade, our money. You're a visitor, Overseer. Don't mistake your badge for roots." He returned his attention to me. "You left an unfinished contract behind, Kael," he said. "That's bad business." "I left a botched ritual and emotional trauma behind," I said. "If you wanted closure, you should have sent a survey." The wind shifted suddenly, slamming wet air between us. Lightning flashed closer, thunder cracking almost on top of it. Arian's smile thinned. "You don't have a choice," he said, voice hardening. "We tried it your way, you ran, fine, you had your adventure." His eyes flicked briefly to Ro. "But the seal is still open. The ritual is incomplete, it's unstable. It needs to be finished before it rots you from the inside or tears something bigger open." "Finished how?" Ro asked, tone like ice. "Back under your control?" Arian's eyes sharpened. "This doesn't concern you, Council Dog," he said. "It concerns me when someone under my protection is threatened," Ro said. The word hit me harder than the wind had. "Under my protection." Arian's expression cooled. "Stand aside," he said. "Or I'll move you." Ro smiled grimly. "Try," he said. Of all the terrible ideas I'd heard from him so far, that might have been in the top 3. They moved at the same time. The next few seconds fractured into lightning-lit snapshots. Arian's aura crashed over us, heavy and cold, the kind of alpha pressure that had once pinned whole rooms to the floor. His men surged forward with him, half-shifted already, teeth bared, claws flashing. Ro met them like a damned wall. He didn't wait. Didn't posture. He stepped into the nearest attacker's space, dropped his center of gravity, and used their momentum. Against them, shoulder slamming one into the cliff face, elbow driving into another's ribs. The third lunged high. Ro ducked, grabbed his arm, twisted. There was a crack. A howl. The storm loved it. Wind screamed around us, rain stinging so hard it felt like needles. Arian moved through the chaos untouched. He was never the first into a fight. He was the one who made sure it happened the way he wanted. He came straight for me. His aura washed over me, thick with command. Old familiar words threaded through the air, not shouted, not quite spoken. A low chant. Under his breath, syllables I hadn't heard since that room with the circle on the floor. My skin crawled. My lungs clenched. The part of me that remembered being young and desperate for someone to say "I'll take care of you" tried to stand up and answer. It hit the same burned-out channels the ritual had left. The pressure slid off. For a heartbeat, Arian's eyes widened. "You really are broken," he said softly. Lightning flared, reflecting in his pupils. "Funny," I said. "From where I'm standing, it looks like your grip isn't as good as you thought." He reached for me. Just like before, his hand on the back of my neck, fingers digging in where the old scar of the seal lay under my skin. The world lurched. Not physically. Inside. It was like someone grabbed the edges of me and pulled. The storm dimmed. Ro's fight blurred into noise. For a dizzy second I was back in that circle, the smell of herbs and hot iron. Choking me, voices chanting as something heavy wrapped around my spine. "Stop," I gasped. The word hardly escaped. "Don't fight it," Arian murmured, breath warm against my ear, just like he had back then. "It'll be easier if you don't fight. I only want what's best for you, pup. To give you a place. A command, an alpha." "The last one nearly killed me," I spat. "You're still here," he said. "Because of me." Power coiled around his hand, buzzing against my skin. Old sigils lit up in my nerves, lines of heat racing along pathways that had been dormant for years. The ritual remembered me. Somewhere beyond the buzzing in my head, Ro shouted my name. I couldn't move. Whatever Arian was dragging up, it wasn't just instinct. It was the original pattern. The chain. The part of me that had been built to say yes, want yes, breathe yes. I hated that part. I missed it. I didn't know. "Finish it," Arian murmured. "Let the bond lock. No more running. No more half-life." The pull twisted. For a heartbeat I saw it. My body bowing, my will folding, my whole world narrowing back down to one voice, one command. No. The refusal didn't come from the burned-out hollow. It came from somewhere else. Somewhere that had learned how to say no even without instinct to back it. And it had a shape. Golden eyes that didn't look away when I said ugly things. A hand that steadied my elbow without asking for anything in return. A man who sat in my broken chair and told me he didn't want to command me. A storm that bent around me instead of through me. The pull of the ritual crashed against that shape and found a new kind of resistance. Something cracked. I heard it more than felt it. A sound like glass under pressure finally deciding which way to break. Arian snarled and pushed harder. Behind us, the fight shifted. I heard the thud of bodies, a grunt cut off halfway, the dull sound of someone hitting stone. "Ro," my mind whispered, uselessly late. And then, through the buzzing static of the ritual and the storm, I felt something else. Weight slamming into us. Arian's hand tore off the back of my neck as another body crashed into his side. The three of us went down in a tangle, my shoulder hitting wet rock, pain flaring bright. Ro. He'd broken from the fight to throw himself between us. Literally. Get off him, he snarled. Voice a sound I'd never heard before. Not command, not warning. Rage. Arian twisted, fingers lighting with that same ugly energy, and drove his hand toward my chest. Ro moved without thinking. He turned into the strike. The impact landed squarely over his heart. The world went white, not metaphorically, not poetically. White. Light seared across my vision. The noise of the storm dropped out for a second, replaced by a high, nauseating ring. Heat rolled over us in a wave that smelled like burnt air and old cymbals. When color snapped back, Ro was on his knees between me and Arian, hands spread over his chest where the blow had landed. Under his palm, through the shredded fabric of his shirt, and the already bloody bandage beneath, a mark flickered. The ghost of a circle, lines of a sigil trying to form and failing. His face was pale. Sweat beaded at his temple, rain streaking through it. He'd taken the heart of the ritual into himself. Idiot, I whispered. It came out broken. Arian stared, breathing hard, hair loosened by the wind. That's not for you, he said, something almost like shock cracking his composure. Council dog. That wasn't. You can't. I just did, Rose said hoarsely. His aura flared once, wildly, then shuddered, as if whatever had hit him was chewing through more than muscle. I pushed myself up, scrambling to my feet despite the way my legs wanted to fold. Something in me had broken open. The dead channels the ritual had once melted weren't as dead as we thought. They'd scarred. They'd rerouted. They'd grown around the damage. And now, with the old pattern trying to reassert itself and finding Ro in the way, everything in me lit up. Instinct. Not the old blind kind. Something sharper. Focused. Mine. Protect. The word wasn't a command from outside. It was a demand from the inside. I stepped into Arian's aura and felt it barely graze me. He pushed pressure at me, desperate now, trying to shove me back down into the shape he remembered. It hit the hollows he'd carved years ago and found them filled with something new. The bind he'd burned into me had left a gap. Ro had stepped into it. Stay away from him, I said. Arian actually recoiled. You feel it, he said quietly. Don't you? The bond trying to latch. You can't exist without one, none of you can, not really. I exist right now telling you to get off my cliff, I said. My voice shook, but not with fear. You don't get to redefine that. Lightning hit close enough that the crack of it made all of us flinch. The smell of ozone punched through the air. The wind changed direction, slamming rain sideways into our faces. Behind Arian, his remaining men hovered, uncertain now. Their alpha wasn't in control of the narrative anymore. That rattled them. Arian's gaze darted to Ro, who was still on his knees, breathing hard, hand pressed to his chest like he was holding something inside by sheer will. This isn't over, Arian said. You can't outrun the nature of what you are, Kael. You're a broken leash trying to pretend it's a knife. Maybe, I said. But broken things cut both ways. His mouth twisted. Another bolt of lightning spidered across the sky. The thunder that followed shook the rock under our feet. We'll speak again, he said. When you're done playing lighthouse keeper and council pet. He whistled. A sharp piercing sound somehow audible through the storm. The others fell back instantly, like someone had pulled a thread through them. They disappeared into the rain and fog, swallowed by the night. I barely saw them go. I dropped to my knees in front of Ro, hands hovering helplessly for a second before I grabbed his shoulders. Hey, I said. Hey, Overseer, stay here. His eyes snapped up to mine, unfocused at first, then sharpening. The mark over his heart flickered once more under his palm, then dimmed, leaving only the faintest impression of lines on his skin. Kael, he said. Just my name. Like he was making sure I was still anchored. I realized I was touching him. Both hands, gripping hard enough to bruise. Instinct screaming mine, in a way that had absolutely nothing to do with chains Arian had tried to build. Oh, I said weakly. That's new. His mouth twitched. We can discuss that later, he said, voice rough. Preferably somewhere not actively being struck by lightning. I laughed. A short, wild sound that felt dangerously close to a sob. Good plan, I said. Can you stand? With help, he admitted. I got my shoulder under his arm, ignoring the way my burned-out not so burned-out nerves lit up at the contact. He was heavy and warm and very, very alive. We staggered back toward the lighthouse together, storm clawing at our backs. The door banged open for us like it had been straining toward this moment. Inside, the lamps were still burning. The wind howled outside, trying to get in. Slowly, gradually, as I got Ro back into the armchair, and watched him press his hand over the fading mark on his chest, as I shook rain out of my hair, and tried not to shake out of sheer adrenaline, something shifted. The thunder rolled farther away. The wind's grip on the walls loosened. The storm outside calmed before I did. Ro didn't die. You'd think that would have made it easier to breathe. It didn't. He slept for a while after Arion left. A real heavy sleep that had nothing to do with council composure, and everything to do with surviving something no one should have been able to walk away from. We'd half fallen, half stumbled back into the lighthouse and somehow made it to my room. It wasn't much, a narrow bed tucked under the slanted roof, a small window facing the sea, maps even here, because I didn't know how to live without them. Now Ro lay on his back, bandages clean but thick over his shoulder and chest, shirt open enough to give everything room to breathe. His hand still hovered sometimes over the spot where the ghost of the ritual mark had burned itself and faded. His eyes stayed closed, but he was present in that way only alphas managed, even unconscious. He took up space like he was holding the roof up with his stubbornness. I spent the day not watching him. Which is to say, I spent the day sitting in a chair by the bed with a book open in my lap, absolutely not reading a single word. Every time his breath hitched, my spine snapped straight. Every time he shifted in his sleep, my fingers clenched in the fabric of my pants. My hands shook so much I had to put the mug of tea down twice to avoid spilling it on him. It's fine, I told the room. I'm fine. He's fine. We're all very fine. The lighthouse creaked skeptically. At some point the light outside shifted from harsh morning gray to softer afternoon silver. The storm had moved on, leaving behind a sky that couldn't decide whether it wanted to be clear or not. Ro stirred. His lashes fluttered, then lifted. Golden eyes blinked blearily at the ceiling first, then shifted to me. Still here, he said, voice rough. Unfortunately, I said. I tried to throw you out but you fused with the mattress. The tiniest curve tugged at his mouth. How long? He asked. Since the storm, I said. You were out for a while. I hesitated. You're sure you're not going to explode, glow, develop a sudden overwhelming urge to chant in dead languages? Not today, he said. Give it time. He tried to sit up. His body promptly informed him that was a terrible idea. He hissed and dropped back with a grimace. Don't, I said, leaning forward despite myself. You just tried to body check an ancient illegal ritual. Lie down and, I don't know, process your life choices. His gaze searched my face. You're shaking, he said. No, I lied. His eyes flicked down to my hands, still curled too tight on my knees. Kael, he said softly. Don't, I said. Don't be gentle about this, it's very rude. Overseers are supposed to be terrifying, not, I gestured weakly at him. This? He asked. Alive? The word landed somewhere under my ribs and sat there. Yeah, I said. That. A knock saved me from answering whatever else might have followed. It wasn't the sharp, precise knock of council boots, or the heavy, demanding pound of a packed door. It was softer, more like someone testing whether the wood was real. Ro frowned. You expecting anyone? He asked. No, I said. I don't have friends. I have people who owe me fish. The knock came again. 3 taps, patient. I left Ro with orders to not heroically die while I'm gone, and went to the front door. Elva stood on the threshold like the storm had deposited her there and then forgotten about her. Her shawls were damp at the edges, hair hanging in its strange intricate braid down her back. Her milky eyes were turned slightly away from me, as if she were listening to the waves instead. You left your window open, she said by way of greeting. The sea's been gossiping. You heard that from down in town? I asked. She snorted. I heard it from between, she said. Let me in, boy. I don't enjoy shouting important mystical truths over the wind. I stepped aside automatically. Make yourself at home, I said. There's not much of it. She moved like she knew the place, stepping around piles of maps and furniture without hesitation. Her hand brushed the wall once, fingertips whispering over peeling paint. You brought someone back with you, she said. I tensed. He's resting, I said. And armed. And grumpy. Don't startle him. I'm not here for him, she said. Her head turned, clouded eyes landing almost exactly on my face. I'm here for you. Lucky me, I said. Did the sea send you a strongly worded complaint form about my life again? She ignored that, and sniffed the air instead, like a dog catching currents. Ritual stink, she muttered. Old. Deep. Disturbed. You finally picked at the scar, It picked at me, I said. Ariane came back. He tried to finish what he started. Ro got in the way. Her mouth pulled down. Stupid, she said. Brave. The two like to share a bed. I'm aware, I said. A little sharper than I meant to. Her head tilted. The seal in you is cracked, she said. Not gone. Not yet. But it's weaker now. You're leaking. Comforting, I said. Love being described like faulty plumbing. There's a chance to take it out completely, she went on. To pull out the burned root instead of trimming its dead leaves. But it will hurt. I swallowed. What kind of hurt? I asked. On a scale from stubbed toe to ancient forbidden magic that nearly killed me last time. Not like before, she said. The worst of the damage was when they built it. Destroying it will feel strange. But it won't own you this time. If you let it go. If, I repeated. She nodded slowly. You've been living around it, she said. You built your life shaped to its absence, to its silence. If I cut it loose, you don't go back to who you were before. There is no before, there's only after, someone new. That someone has to be chosen, not by Arian, not by any alpha, by you. The idea hit like cold water. So did the fear. What if I don't like who that is? I asked, quieter than I meant to. Elva's expression softened in a way I hadn't thought it could. That's the point of choosing, she said. You can always change your mind later. But you can't make that choice while someone else's chains are still welded to your spine, even if they've gone slack. I looked toward the stairs that led to my room, where Ro lay in my bed, with a ritual mark fading under his skin that should have been mine. What about him? I asked. That thing that hit his chest. Is he going to sprout runes next full moon? The strike glanced off you, she said. Found something stubborn in him instead. He intercepted it, like a fool. A hint of fondness curled her mouth. Part of the pattern tried to tie to him. But he's too grown and too contrary for it to settle. He'll carry a scar, not a chain. The tightness in my chest eased by a fraction. Of course he's too contrary, I said. He argues with weather. She smiled. Decide, Kael, she said. Do you want to keep wearing a burned collar with no leash, or do you want a neck that's only yours? The answer should have been easy. It wasn't. I need a minute, I said. Take it, she said. But don't take a lifetime. The shore was calmer than it had any right to be after what it had seen. By the time I got down to the water, the sky had settled into deep evening blue, streaked with lingering clouds. The sea reflected the last scraps of light like melted metal, silver over dark, moving in slow, heavy breaths. I stood where the wet sand met the slick rocks, wind tugging at my clothes, hair blown into my eyes. The air tasted like salt and endings. I'd come here as a runaway, half-starved and wholly empty, staring at a horizon that had looked back at me and shrugged. I'd come here on nights when the silence inside was too loud and needed something bigger to drown it out. I'd come here recently because a very annoying overseer kept finding me near the tide line, his presence stopping the old ghosts from pressing too close. Now I came because I had to decide whether I wanted to keep being the ghost or not. You've seen the whole show, I told the ocean. Congratulations. Front row seat to my bad decisions. The waves rolled in, then out, unimpressed. I was an obedient thing once, I said. I remember that. I remember what it felt like to fit inside someone else's idea of use. The wind stole the words and threw them back. Then I was nothing, no scent, no pull, just a gap shaped like a person. I built myself around that, the lighthouse, the roots, the jokes. Being the broken omega who smiled too sharp. I thought of Arian's hand at my neck. Of his voice telling me it would be easier if I stopped fighting. I thought of Rose stepping between us, taking the blow meant to finish the job. I don't want that bond back, I said to the sea. I don't want any bond that starts with be easier to manage. The water hissed against the rocks, agreement or mockery, hard to tell. But, I added, closing my eyes, I don't want to be hollow anymore either. Images flickered behind my eyelids. The cramped circle room. The caravan roads. The scavenged market stalls of Haven Rock. The lighthouse rising crooked and stubborn against the sky. Maps under my hands. Salt on my tongue. Ro's hand closing around my wrist and not making me move. Ro bleeding on the sand, because he'd decided I was worth standing in front of. Ro in my bed, frowning even in sleep because he didn't know how to do anything halfway. I opened my eyes. The horizon didn't offer answers. I'd have to make my own. Fine, I said. Let's see who I am without you then. The way back up to the lighthouse felt shorter. Elva waited in my room, sitting at the foot of the bed like she'd been there my whole life. Ro half sat against the headboard now, stubbornness apparently having won a minor victory over common sense. He looked better. Tired, drawn, but more himself. His gaze found mine the second I stepped in. Elva explained, he said. Of course she did, I said. The sea won't shut up about my personal development. Elva huffed. Well? She asked. Have you decided? I walked to the side of the bed, feeling weirdly like I was approaching a cliff edge again. I don't want my instincts back, I said slowly. Not the way they were. Not as a default setting someone else gets to exploit. I don't want to wake up and find my spine politely waiting for orders. Ro's hand tensed on the blanket. But, I went on. I want the part of me they tried to steal back. The part that chooses. The part that wants things and isn't afraid of wanting them just because someone might use it. I want myself back, whatever that turns out to be. Elva's milky eyes crinkled at the corners. Good, she said simply. Give me your hands. My pulse hammered. Is it going to be less talking, she said. More doing? I snorted, because apparently I didn't know how to face powerful magic without being difficult. Then I held my hands out to her. Her fingers were warm and dry as they closed around mine. She smelled like old smoke and herbs and the strange metallic tang of worked power. Close your eyes, she said. I did. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, light bloomed. Not outside. Inside. Behind my sternum, along my spine, through the places the ritual had once seared black. It wasn't bright white, punishing and hot like Arian's had been. It was softer. Gold, maybe. The color you get when sunlight hits old wood. It moved along the old pathways, not rebuilding them the way they were, but loosening them. Peeling burned metal off bone. Unhooking loops of something that had never belonged there in the first place. Pain licked at the edges of it, but it wasn't the agony I remembered. More like pressure being released from too tight bindings. Like pulling a thorn that had been stuck so long you'd forgotten what it felt like not to have it. Breathe, Elva murmured. I did. The air tasted strange, new. Something deep in my chest shuddered, then settled differently. The old emptiness didn't vanish. It changed. It wasn't a hollow anymore. It was open space, room. The light flared one more time, then dimmed, sinking into the places it had cleaned. Elva let go of my hands. When I opened my eyes, the world looked the same. Except my own reflection, caught in the small mirror on the wall, looked back at me like it recognized me for the first time. Well? Elva asked. I touched my chest, half expecting to feel some sigil burned into my skin. Nothing there but skin, heartbeat, and a strange lightness. I'm still me, I said. Yes, she said. That was the goal. I realized I was trembling again. This time, when Ro reached out, I didn't pretend not to see it. His fingers wrapped around my wrist, gentle. How do you feel? He asked. I thought about lying, about making a joke. Terrified, I said instead. And, like the floor stopped tilting under my feet for the first time since I was 16. His grip tightened, just a little. Good, he said. Elva made a small, satisfied sound and slid off the bed. My work is done, she said. Try not to let any more idiot alphas throw themselves into ancient death spells on your behalf. No promises, I said. She patted my shoulder on the way out, finding it unerringly. I'll send you a bill, she added. Payable in fish. And then she was gone, the lighthouse door creaking shut behind her. Silence settled, warm and strange. Ro's hand was still around my wrist. I looked at it. At him. His face was uncharacteristically unguarded. No overseer mask. Just a man who'd seen too much and was still trying anyway. I don't care what you are, he said quietly. Omega, anomaly, ritual scar, Storm's bad idea. His mouth twisted. I don't care what the council writes next to your name, just stay. The words hit something newly raw and newly mine. I blinked at him. Try asking like a normal person, I said faintly. You emotionally constipated wolf. A flush crept up his neck, faint, but there. He swallowed. Please stay, he said. No command. Just a request, held out like cupped hands. My laugh came out half sob, half hysterical relief. Okay, I said. Since you asked nicely. His shoulders loosened like I'd just taken a weight off them he didn't know he'd been carrying. Later, after we rebandaged what needed rebandaging and argued briefly about what counted as rest, I climbed the narrow stairs to the very top of the lighthouse. The lamp hadn't been lit in years. The mechanism was stiff from disuse. The glass fogged with salt. I set my hand on it and felt the history there. All the nights it had once turned sunlight into something ships could trust. You and me both, I muttered. Time to work again, I guess. It took effort, but eventually the gears turned. The wick caught. Light flared, stuttered, then steadied, warm and clear. When I stepped back down into the lantern room, Ro was there. He shouldn't have been climbing stairs in his condition. I was going to yell at him later. Right now, I didn't. He came up behind me, slow and careful, and slid his good arm around my waist. His chest pressed against my back, solid and warm. I let myself lean into it just a little. Together we watched as the beacon swung out over the sea, cutting a wide, bright arc through the dark. Below us, Haven Rock gleamed in small points of light. Beyond, the horizon waited, indifferent and endless. For the first time since I'd come here, the tower didn't feel like a hiding place. It felt like a starting point. Looks good on, Ro murmured against my hair. Yeah, I said. It does. Broken, but mine. New light washed out over the water, and I stood there with him, watching it go,